The morning my wife looked into my eyes and calmly told me I wasn't her husband anymore, something inside me shattered without making a sound. There were no screams, no broken dishes, no dramatic goodbye. Just a sentence so cold that it made my entire world feel unfamiliar. I stood in the marble hallway of the $10 million estate we had built together, surrounded by memories that suddenly meant nothing to her. As she walked toward the front door with strangers following behind her, I pressed one button on my phone. The massive iron gates slowly closed with a deep mechanical rumble, sealing the estate from the outside world. At that moment, I wasn't trying to trap anyone. I was trying to protect the only thing I had left, my dignity, my memories, and the life I had spent 20 years building. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes love is worth fighting for, and subscribe to the Story Corner. Your support helps bring more emotional stories like this to life. For nearly 20 years, I believed Emily and I had built something that could survive anything. We had met when neither of us had much money. I worked long nights managing construction projects while she taught elementary school. Every dollar we earned was carefully saved. Vacations were rare, expensive dinners almost non-existent, but we laughed often because we believed we were building a future together. Years later, after several successful business investments and countless sacrifices, that future stood before us in the form of an incredible estate overlooking the lake. It wasn't just a mansion. Every room represented sleepless nights, impossible decisions, financial risks, and dreams that had finally become reality. Success changed many things around us, but I never believed it had changed us. Looking back, I realize I was paying attention to balance sheets instead of emotions. I celebrated business victories while quietly ignoring the distance growing inside my own home. Emily smiled less. She spent more time away with charity organizations, social events, and new friends I barely knew. Whenever I asked if everything was all right, she always smiled politely and assured me everything was fine. I wanted to believe her because accepting the truth would have meant admitting I had failed at the one relationship that mattered most. Everything collapsed on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I returned home earlier than expected, hoping to surprise her with dinner. Instead, I found unfamiliar luxury vehicles parked outside the mansion. Inside were attorneys, financial advisors, and several people I had never met. Emily stood confidently in the center of the living room as if she had rehearsed every word. Then she quietly informed me that I was no longer the man she considered her husband. She explained that emotionally our marriage had ended years ago and that today she intended to begin a completely new chapter without me. The words didn't sound angry. They sounded final. As the reality settled in, something unexpected happened inside me. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I simply walked outside into the afternoon sunlight, pulled out my phone, and activated the estate's private security system. The towering iron gates slowly closed while security protocols locked every external entrance. Everyone looked confused, including Emily. The estate legally belonged to the trust one had established years earlier for asset protection, and until legal matters were resolved, no one could remove property, artwork, vehicles, or confidential business records. It wasn't revenge. It was responsibility. News of the incident spread quickly. Local reporters described me as a billionaire imprisoning his own wife inside a mansion. Social media exploded with opinions from people who had never met us. Some called me controlling. Others claimed I was finally standing up for himself. Strangers debated my marriage while I sat alone in my study surrounded by family photographs that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. The following weeks became the hardest period of my life. Lawyers examined contracts. Financial experts reviewed ownership documents. Friends quietly chose sides. Some disappeared completely. The enormous mansion that once echoed with laughter now felt painfully silent. Wealth suddenly seemed meaningless. Expensive artwork couldn't comfort loneliness. Luxury cars couldn't erase heartbreak. Every expensive possession reminded me that success without emotional connection was just another form of emptiness. Late one evening, I wandered into the attic searching for old business records. Instead, I discovered several forgotten storage boxes filled with handwritten letters, photographs, children's drawings from our nieces and nephews, and journals Emily had written during the early years of our marriage. Reading those pages changed everything. They weren't filled with complaints about money or work. They were filled with simple hopes. She missed eating breakfast together. She missed spontaneous road trips. She missed conversations that lasted longer than 5 minutes. She wasn't asking for luxury. She had always wanted my presence. That discovery forced me to confront painful truths about myself. I had spent years believing providing financially was the greatest expression of love. I convinced myself that every extra business meeting, every late-night conference call, every missed anniversary was for our future. I never realized that while I was building a mansion, the emotional home inside our marriage was quietly falling apart. Instead of fighting harder in court, I made an unexpected decision. I instructed my attorneys to pursue fairness instead of victory. I invited independent mediators to help resolve everything respectfully. More importantly, I wrote Emily a letter unlike anything I had written before. There were no legal arguments, no accusations, and no attempts to convince her to return. The letter simply acknowledged every moment I had failed to truly see the woman who had once believed in me before anyone else did. Weeks passed before she responded. When we finally agreed to meet, it wasn't inside a courtroom or inside the mansion. We met at the small neighborhood park where we had shared our first date decades earlier. Time had changed both of us, but sitting on the same old wooden bench reminded us of two young people who once dreamed together with nothing but hope. Neither of us pretended the pain had disappeared. Trust couldn't be rebuilt in a single afternoon. Regret couldn't erase years of emotional distance. Yet something surprising happened. For the first time in many years, we truly listened instead of preparing our next response. We acknowledged mistakes without competing over who had suffered more. We accepted that both love and neglect can quietly exist inside the same marriage if people stop paying attention. The mansion remained legally protected while everything was sorted out, but emotionally the locked gates no longer represented anger. They became a symbol of boundaries, reflection, and healing. Sometimes protecting your home begins with protecting your heart long enough to understand what truly matters. Months later, the estate looked different. One unused ballroom became a community learning center for disadvantaged teenagers interested in architecture and engineering. Another section became a charitable foundation supporting struggling families rebuilding after financial hardship. Wealth that had once existed only for status finally began serving a greater purpose. Emily chose her own path, and although we didn't immediately return to being husband and wife, we slowly became two people capable of respecting each other again. Whether our marriage would fully recover remained uncertain, but bitterness no longer controlled our future. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It simply refused to let the past destroy everything that remained. Looking back now, I realize the gates I locked that unforgettable afternoon were never truly about property. They were about stopping long enough to recognize that relationships require protection long before they require lawyers. Love doesn't usually disappear in one dramatic moment. It fades quietly through countless missed opportunities to care, listen, appreciate, and simply be present. If this story touched your heart, please support this video by liking, sharing it with your friends and family, subscribing to the Story Corner, and telling us your thoughts in the comments. Your support allows more inspiring stories of hope, forgiveness, and second chances to reach people who may need them most. Special request, comment below with one word, forgiveness or respect, and tell us which one you believe saves more relationships. In the end, I discovered that the greatest fortune was never the $10 million estate standing behind those iron gates. The greatest fortune was learning that kindness, humility, and the courage to change are worth far more than any mansion, and that sometimes the strongest walls we build are not meant to keep people out, but to give our hearts the time they need to heal before opening the gates once again.